Hey everyone, welcome to the session Testing Techniques and Test Case Design Techniques. Let's get started. There are multiple testing techniques and then testing techniques. So the basic things are equivalence partitioning, value analysis, state transition, decision table. All these are like some basic techniques which you need to follow before even designing the test case or before even designing your tests or before starting the testing. So what is equivalence partitioning? Equivalence partitioning is a method also known as equivalence partitioning class. So in a software testing or a black box testing which you're doing, the data, whichever the data which you're receiving, it is equally split into thing two halves, and then when you're trying to give an input, you're giving both the inputs. So in equivalence partitioning, classes are evaluated for the given conditions. Whenever any input is given, then type of input condition is checked, and then for input conditions, equivalence class represents or describes the set of valid and invalid inputs. So if you're having a login screen as a example, so considering equivalence partitioning technique, so for example, if you're given the value for entering your age as 1 to 10, you need to uh, you need to validate for the same kind of equivalence partitioning from 1 to 10. The numbers you have to select in such a way that it is having 1 to 10 also, and it is having a negative values also. So both the validations is known as both the things considering both the scenarios is known as equivalence partitioning. And when you're talking about the boundary value analysis is, for example, if you consider the same example where there is a field for inputting your age. So in that particular case, if you consider boundary value, you should consider the age scenario and the actual scenario. So the maximum age which you can enter is given as 10. So you consider 10 as x and you do 10 plus 1 and 10 minus 1. So that is the boundary value which you have to validate. So if the minimum value is 0, you consider 0 as x and you do x plus 1 and x minus 1. So these are six different values which you need to validate for boundary value analysis. For each variable, we need to check the minimum value, just above the minimum value, nominal value, just below the maximum value, and maximum value. All these things, the combinations of performing all these type of scenarios wherein you consider the range, minimum range and the maximum range, minimum range plus 1, minimum range minus 1, maximum range plus 1, maximum range minus 1. These kind of scenarios is known as boundary value analysis. And what is state transition diagram? This is state transition is whenever you consider you're entering this, let's consider same example. You're entering the age, you enter the valid age, and then it is going to a different screen as soon as you enter the age. So that is the state transition. You're transitioning from one state to the other state. So for that, you should be entering the valid values. So validating this transition is known as state transition. It involves two things mainly. One is the input and the actions. You may be inputting the right values and you will be clicking on submit button. These are the two things which is considered for state transitioning. Event and the actions. It should be a smooth transition. There should be no lag. There should be no delay. All these things are to be considered when you're doing the state transition. This you need to consider when you're designing a test case or when you're performing a test execution. You need to keep this in mind and then make sure you verify according to the specified state transition and decision table again. So decision table in any decision table you have logics which is already integrated for development. So there may be if condition, there might be for loops, there might be any looping structures or any conditions which is already given in while the developers are developing the application. So in validating all the conditions, making sure you are touching all the conditions and then loopings so that you get the valid response. That is known as decision table verification. So when you're considering this particular section of testing technique, right, you need to make sure you have all the data which is required to do a decision. So if your developer has given a code wherein your age is shown as maximum age can be entered only 10, you need to validate that particular piece, and you need to validate the minimum piece of the age and in between values also. And also you need to validate whether the negative values are impacting, positive values are impacting, and any special characters are impacting. All these are some validations. In front end, you just see a main form, but at the back end, it might be entering a different loops when or different conditions when you are doing multiple different options. So that we need to make sure and validate all these kind of scenarios also. In decision table, we have two types of decision table. One is limited entry and the other one is extended entry. So we have to make sure we cover all these things when you're testing or when you're designing any testing scenarios or when you're designing any test cases. These are some basic things which you need to consider when you're designing any test case or any tests. Thank you.